It's a new day dawning. The time is at hand where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. And let the King of Glory in. Open the door.
All right, open up the door starts right now, so fling wide, you heavenly gates, and prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John was on the island of Patmos. He was in prison for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And he heard a sound behind him, and he said, behold, I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven, and I heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I will show you the things which must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need the heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us. The things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass. Those things which must take place. Those things which are taking place even now. That is what this broadcast is all about. Discussing the issues of the day. Discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and worldview. Good afternoon, everybody. Andy White here, and what you are about to hear is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. And I just want to greet all my supporters and listeners from all across the fruited plain and all around the spherical globe. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. Hey, I am streaming live over on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page. If you'd like to come on over to Facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. That is the Open Up the Doors Facebook page. If you've never liked the page, please like the page and join the Open Up the Doors family. That's what we are. Our supporters. We'll stay in touch with each other. I like to be as interactive with the audience as much as possible. Join us over on Facebook Live. Let us know where you're watching from. Please share this into your streams. It's such an incredible, incredible help. Please help me out and share this into your streams and invite people over to Open Up the Doors. We are, if you are outside of the Faith FM broadcast area, we are streaming live over the internet at hamptonschristian.com. And the best way to listen to Faith FM, if you're outside of the listening area, is to download the free app. We have the free apps for your Android over at Google Play and the Apple apps over at the Apple Store. Just do the search for Faith FM Broadcasting and download that app for your iPhone, your iPad, your whatever your cell phone is. And the apps work great. They really, really do. It's such a great thing to have. But what else do I want to share before I get into it? There's so much going on. It's absolutely unbelievable. Oh, my email address. If you'd like to email me at ajwhite777 at icloud.com. It's ajwhite777 at icloud.com. If you'd like to correspond with me, I'd be happy to hear from you. All right, so it's blast off time, and oh man, there is so much going on. It's just unbelievable, and I absolutely know that there is no way I'm going to get through everything that's going on in this world right now, today, in this broadcast, because it's like, folks, I'm telling you, it's like the wheels are about to come off the cart. The cart is just rolling down the hill as fast as it can go, and the wheels are about to fall off. But there's something that I say all the time and time again. In fact, I say it so much, my wife cringes when she hears it. Honey, if you're tuned in right now, you might want to put your hands over your ears, because I'm going to say it once again. But it's going to be the focal point of this broadcast today. And this is it, because you've got to nail this down. I've said it time and time again, but the political maneuverings and machinations of men and of nations is nothing less than the prophetic determinations of the living God. I'll say it again. The political maneuverings and machinations of men and of nations is nothing less than the prophetic determinations of the living God. The prophet Isaiah said, behold, the nations are as a drop in the bucket, and are counted as small dust on the scales. I'm laughing because my wife just texted me with the argh. She's heard that statement so many times, but it's true. It's a true foundational principle. It really is. If we would lay hold of this, we would understand what's going on in the world. But let me get back to my quote in Isaiah, folks. Behold, the nations are as a drop in the bucket and are counted as a small dust on the scales. He lifts up the isles as a very little thing. All the nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted by him as less than nothing and worthless. The geopolitics of today's world ought to be more rightly called the geo-prophetical maneuverings of Almighty God. I talk about the political maneuverings and machinations of men and of nations, but they really are the geo-prophetical maneuverings of Almighty God. God has always moved geo-prophetically, my friends. When he didn't like what was going on at the Tower of Babel, he scattered them. When God needed to start a new line of people, dedicated and separated to himself apart from the idolatry and paganism that the world had fallen into, he called a man named Abram out from his home in Ur of the Chaldeans and brought him into a new land that God would make his own. God has always moved geo-prophetically. When the iniquities of the Amorites had filled up the cup of the Lord's wrath, he delivered Israel out of the land of Egypt and brought them into the land of Canaan to drive out the Amorites and the inhabitants of that land because of their gross demonic paganism and vile practices. God has always moved geo-prophetically. Throughout the entire biblical history, we see God raising up and moving and using one nation against another for his divine purposes. It's biblical history. And God hasn't changed one bit. And just to be clear, he's not the cause of the evil. He is not the author of the vileness of nations, of the wickedness of men, of the political maneuverings of men. He's not the cause of it. So let's be clear about that. But he uses these things in his foreknowledge to accomplish his eternal purposes. That's why I like to say, and I penned that phrase myself, and I'm going to say it again, the political maneuverings and machinations of men and of nations is nothing less than the prophetic determinations of the living God. God has always, always, always moved geo-prophetically. It's the geo-prophetic maneuverings of Almighty God. That's what we're witnessing in this world today. He uses these things to accomplish his eternal purposes. Never forget, my friends, that God used the wicked and evil intentions of the political machinations of leaders in Jesus' day to crucify him. Jesus was crucified because of the political dealings that were going down. But God used their evil intentions. God used their evil purposes for his eternal purpose, which obviously was the redemption of the whole world. And I'm saying all that because it's so foundational that we understand. We like to use the cliche, God's in control. But yes, God truly is in control. And that brings us to today. And that brings us to all the stuff that's just going on in the world around us. And man, oh man, there is so much going on. And here's the thing. To the undiscerning and to the earthbound, it's only about politics, or it's just about economics, or just some sociological thing in their mind. To see what's going on in the world today, and especially in the Middle East, but to not understand it, man, I got to tell you, one has to be either completely ignorant of biblical prophecy or completely dismissive of biblical prophecy, neither of which is a good place to be, my friends. But to those with discerning and spiritual eyes, we know and we understand, or at least we ought to, that it is so much more than those merely incidental and situational circumstances. But what we are seeing unfolding before our very eyes is the eternal plan of God coming to pass right before our eyes. And right now, just looking at the news for the last several days, for the last week, there is a whole lot of geo-prophetical maneuverings of Almighty God taking place right now. Folks, it seems like something really big is brewing once again. You know, about a year and a half ago, maybe it was almost 2 years, I think it was about a year and a half ago, we were all on edge, feeling like, you know, World War III was about to break out, and everyone was just feeling like, or at least a lot of people, maybe not everyone, because there were a lot of people with their heads in the sand, but for a lot of people were sensing that, man, again, when is the wheels going to fall off the cart? When's the shoe going to drop? And then it subsided. It seems like things have been relatively calm, and, you know, President Trump's been working out deals with China and deals with Kim Jong-un. But you know what? They're all starting to just fall through the cracks again. And all of a sudden there's this building up of this sense of something is brewing big. When is the shoe going to drop? There's a lot of chatter going on. I've been noticing out there. There's a lot of chatter going on that something major is about to happen. Some of it is coming up from some conspiracy theorists and stuff, and I tend to shy away from that. But with everything, there's always a little bit of element of truth. But just this past week, we sent a carrier group, the USS Lincoln carrier group, to the Mideast. We sent 4 squadrons of B-52s the other day into the Mideast. We've got a carrier group off the coast of Venezuela. China and Russia and Iran have been triangulating against the U.S. And brothers and sisters, Rocket Man is back. Oh yes, Kim Jong-un is back to firing off his missiles. In fact, on the cover of Drudge right now, if you were to go over and look at the cover of Drudge, and I'm not trying to be offensive here, I didn't post it, but there's a picture of Kim Jong-un, a picture of him flipping the bird, giving the one-finger salute in the face. I don't know who he was giving it to, whether he's giving it to America, whether he's giving it to the world, whether he's flipping off Donald Trump, I don't know. But there's a picture of Kim Jong-un on the cover of Drudge, just giving off his middle finger. Rocket Man is back. We're closer to war with Iran and China than we've ever been. And in the midst of this, I'm just setting up the scenario, folks. In the midst of this, the Dems in D.C. are all consumed with a bunch of nonsense and political harassment. The world has some real problems going on, but they're busy chasing after fake problems and ghosts. But that's for another day. But all these things, I'm going to get to some of these things as this broadcast progresses. But right now, and I don't think it's coincidental, by the way, I really don't, because I do believe the enemy has a plan. Not only does the enemy have a plan politically against us here in America and sociologically, but it's the same plan of the enemy. And I'll explain that in a moment. But I want to begin with all of these things, with the escalating violence, the almost all-out war that's going on in Israel right now. Since this past weekend, Israel has been under attack with more and more missiles being fired into Israeli territory. It's upwards of over 700 missiles already. And right on cue, with all of these missile attacks coming from Hamas and from Gaza, you've got the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee issued a statement the other day condemning Israel for, quote, targeting and killing Palestinian civilians, including children and infants. It's an absolute lie. But that's what the Arab world, the Palestinian world does with their propaganda. It never once in this, the ADC, never once, the ADC again is the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, they never once mentioned in their condemnation and their false accusation against Israel, they never once in their comments mentioned the firing of almost 700 rockets by the rulers of Gaza that targeted Israeli civilians. And it would never mention the horrible reality that Hamas and Islamic Jihad deliberately use Palestinian civilians, including children and infants, quote unquote. The Hamas and Islamic Jihad, they're using these people as human shields in order to increase the number of Palestinian civilians who are inadvertently killed or injured by Israel's legitimate efforts to protect its civilians from the unlawful rocket attacks that have been almost overwhelming. As I said, it's 700 rockets and counting. And it seems to me, and to a lot of other people, that Hamas, with a whole lot of help from Iran, is trying to overwhelm the Iron Dome anti-missile system. And that's a key word for this broadcast today, overwhelm, because that's the strategy of the enemy, to overwhelm the system. Right now we have people trying to overwhelm our borders and overwhelm our immigration system and overwhelm our social services system. And it's beginning to take an effect. And the enemy's trying to overwhelm Israel by way of analogy, because it's the same strategy. They're trying to overwhelm the Iron Dome anti-system missile, as I said. And it seems like they're becoming more successful at it. Islamic Jihad has warned that it expects war with Israel this summer. Well, it seems to me there really is almost really all-out war, but they're saying we're going to have all-out war with Israel by the summer. And the recent missile barrage was just a warm-up. Now, you got to understand something here. Let me point it out to you. Islamic Jihad is directly controlled by Iran. And this could be an effort to preoccupy Israel as well as us, while Iran makes other moves. There's a strategy going on. The strategy is to overwhelm the system. It's the strategy of the enemy on many levels. And just the other day, in fact, it was yesterday in the Jerusalem Post, they were talking about this. Because, as I said, over the course of the weekend, Hamas and Islamic Jihad launched nearly 700 rockets from Gaza. They killed 4 people. They injured more than 200 in Israel. And according to the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, the 690 or so rockets that were launched from Gaza, Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system intercepted 240 of them. Now, do the math. That means that roughly 2/3 of the missiles were getting through, because that was the strategy. The number of unintercepted rockets and Israeli fatalities has sparked an inquiry, according to Haaretz, about the effectiveness of the Iron Dome. It's been very effective, but if you overwhelm it, it can only do so much. And has Hamas and Islamic Jihad, have they found a way to thwart the system? Yes, overwhelm it. Because Hamas was quick to declare that it had achieved victory by doing just that, overwhelming the Israeli defenses with concentrated barrages of projectiles. According to a spokesman for Hamas, where he says, thanks be to God, of course, Allahu Akbar, we have succeeded in overcoming the so-called Iron Dome by adopting the tactic of firing dozens of missiles in one single burst. And the intensity of the fire and the great destructive ability of the missiles that were introduced by the Qassam brigades succeeded, in their view, in causing great losses and destruction to the enemy. And that's what it's about. It's about overwhelming the system, overwhelming the Iron Dome. And it's all being done on multiple fronts. But Iran is, as I've shared in the past before, the Prince of Persia is rising in these last days. And Iran, through its Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who are its proxies in Gaza, it's been confirmed they are behind the current escalation in the south there, the south of Israel in Gaza, on the border there. And why did Islamic Jihad do this? According to Yaakov Amador, who's a security advisor with Israel, why did the Islamic Jihad do this? Yaakov Amador said this: the answer is again and again and again, Iran. Islamic Jihad is completely owned and operated Iranian subsidiary. Islamic Jihad working with Hamas. Hamas is being funded by Iran as well. But specifically the Islamic Jihad was established by Iran, financed by Iran, and does what Iran wants it to do. Now, something jumped out at me when I was reading this article. Financed by Iran. And you want to know how? You want to know how it was financed by Iran, brothers and sisters? With that $150 billion given to them by the Obama administration. That's how. Remember back when the Iranian deal was being signed and when then Secretary of State John Kerry admitted that there would be no way to stop Iran from using that money to fund terrorism? Let me give you a quote. Let's go down memory lane here, and I'll give you a quote from John Kerry, then Secretary of State during the Iranian deal days. Quote, I think that some of it, meaning the money, I think that some of it will end up in the hands of the IRGC, that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, or other entities, some of which are labeled terrorists. To some degree, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every component of that can be prevented. So Kerry was admitting that the money that the Obama administration was releasing, the assets that had been frozen since the days of the Iranian Revolution back in the 70s, all that money that was released, Kerry admitted would be used to fund terrorism. And then he says he's got the audacity to say, well, it can't be prevented. Yeah. Hello, it could have been prevented in a real easy way. It was called don't unfreeze the assets. Well then, why did you give him the money if you knew it couldn't be prevented in the first place? Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry. You needed to grease their palms to accept that crummy Iranian nuke deal. You wanted to secure that pathetically bad Iranian nuke deal that did absolutely nothing, by the way, to stop their nuke program. Just the other day, President Husseini of Iran said they were starting up the what do they call those things? They're just starting up their nuke program. Oh, the things that make the uranium. I can't remember the terms right now, but did nothing. It did nothing to stop the nuke program. But what it did do is it gave them money and gave them finances to fund their terror state. And that's the only thing that's even thwarted it at all has been President Trump's withdrawing from the deal and returning to sanctions. Kerry back then fusion rods. Thank you. Brother Jimmy to the rescue. Jim Dandy to the rescue. He did that last week too. Thank you, brother. The fusion rods. Yes. John Kerry also said that the Obama administration believes the amount of money that might flow to terrorist groups will be limited. Listen to what they said back then. Quote, again, a John Kerry quote from about whatever it was, 4 years or so ago. Quote, the demands of Iran and of the Rouhani administration and of the supreme leader for the development in their country are such that there is no way they can succeed in doing what they want to do if they are very busy funding a lot of terrorism and if they are putting money into that kind of enterprise and not into things they need to do to fund their economy. So they were thinking that they were thinking in the most highest and noblest of terms that once we gave them that $150 billion, those nice altruistic leaders over there and the supreme leader over there in Iran, they would put all that money back into the Iranian economy. No. Yeah, Kerry and the administration got that wrong too. Iran did nothing to help their economy with that money. It all went to funding the Iranian God and Hamas and Hezbollah and raising up this thing called Islamic Jihad. And as a matter of fact, that's the very reason the Iranians were having protests and revolts 2 years ago. The Iranian people, I should say, the ones who are suffering through the sanctions, the ones who are suffering in their economy. And 2 years ago, and even a year and a half ago, a year ago, they were in the streets protesting precisely because they saw that the money being used, the money that was released to them, that $150 billion, they was watching it being used not to help the Iranian people, not to help the Iranian economy, but to support Hamas. And all of a sudden, there were videos coming from Tehran and from Iran, videos on social media showing crowds in downtown Tehran chanting, "Death to the dictator" and "Death to Palestine." And that was a real turn. They weren't chanting death to Israel, but they were chanting death to Palestine because they were angry that their regime was squandering all that beautiful $150 billion on the Palestinians. But the supreme leader, my friends, and the Iranian mullahs there, they're not trying to help the Palestinians because they're so altruistic. The regime wants to secure their Shia Crescent Caliphate. And sadly, as I predicted at the time, those protests and those revolts, I said they wouldn't go anywhere. We all wish they would have. We all wish they would have overthrown the Iranian regime, but I said it would be crushed. And sadly, I was right. But moving right along here, because I got to take a break soon. Let's get to where we are again right now. I wanted to bring a little bit of history in because it's all connected. Because right now tensions are at the breaking point with the U.S. and Iran. They really are. Make no mistake about it. But tensions are also dangerously close to the breaking point with China too. So hold on to your seat, my friends, because I believe there's a plan afoot to try and overwhelm our resources, just like Islamic Jihad tried to overwhelm and they were succeeding, overwhelming the Iron Dome. The overall broad strategy is to cause us to wear ourselves so thin. Just last month or so, there was a Pentagon war game and strategy session showing that if we got ganged up on by Russia and China and Iran together, something I've been predicting now for about a year or so, we would lose. Quote, this was from an article in a military magazine. In our games, when we fight Russia and China, blue gets its, I won't use the word they used, blue gets its butt kicked. That's us. Rand analysis David Ochmenek said last week, as reported by Breaking Defense. He notes that in scenario after scenario, American forces suffer heavy losses, especially to expensive legacy systems like aircraft carrier fleets. They suffer extreme losses while still being unable to prevent red forces, that's China and Russia, from achieving their strategic objectives. And that's a problem, say Rand and Pentagon planners. Yeah, you better believe it's a problem. Not just because there would be massive loss of American life if the United States Achilles heel was exposed, that our large carriers, large bases, and all of our whiz-bang weapons, that's a great term there for a defense guy, defense contractor, whiz-bang weapons. Hey, we got some new whiz-bang weapons, but we're unable to use them. Our alliances around the world would collapse, meaning global war would become far more likely, not less. And China and Russia and Iran are triangulating. And I'll throw Turkey in there too, as I'll get to in a moment. But Russia and China and Iran reportedly have a presence. Here we go, folks. This is what I mean by triangulating. It's not just happening over there, over there, over there. No. They have a presence. Russia, China, and Iran have a presence in South America, including Cuba, where there are 20,000 troops in Cuba. And just the other day, a representative from Florida, Representative Mario Diaz-Balart, appeared on the Tucker Carlson show last week, and he made the statement that there already are nuclear weapons in Venezuela. Stuff's happening, and it's getting to the point where you can't even keep up. And in the meantime, a lot of us are ignoring it. The American media is ignoring a lot of this because they just want to go after, Russian collusion. When it's It's dead, man. Give it up. They want to distract from the real issues. But that's really another issue for another day. I'm going to take a break right now. But right now, I just want you guys to hear this great tune by Daryl Evans, because I know with all this stuff that I'm talking about here, it can all of a sudden like start to get a little heavy. I'm not trying to be heavy. I'm trying to be informative. But the bottom line is this. Nothing else matters. For those of us who know the Lord Jesus, you know what it says in the scripture, for this world and the lusts thereof are passing away, but he who does the will of the Lord will abide forever. And here's Daryl Evans. Nothing else matters. Stick around, folks. I'll be right back. The fusion of heart, mind, and soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Andy White here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Nepeag, WEGQ 91.7 in Quogue. And thanks for joining in for this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. If you're just joining us, I am streaming live on my Open Up the Doors Facebook page over at facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. Please go on over there and join in the conversation and say hello to one another. I got some folks there now. And, hey, if you got any questions or input you'd like to share with us, just fill them in over there on the conversation there. And I'll see if I could, get it dovetailed into the broadcast here if you'd like. If you got something you'd like to contribute, let us know where you're watching from as well. And please share this all across the fruited plain through your Facebook stream. It really helps. Help me out, folks, and share this Facebook live stream video, which we have going right now. And then during the course of the next day or so, we take this live video and we put it down into a HD, really nice production that's put together by our audio producer. And it's there in the archives on my YouTube page. Oh, that reminds me. Please, if you have not subscribed to my YouTube page, just go on over to YouTube. Do a search, look up Andy White, look up Open Up the Doors, and subscribe to my YouTube page if you could. It would be a blessing. Please do that. So again, I'm looking at the clock. I'm looking at my notes, and they never ever line up together. But I am going somewhere with this, and like I shared in the first block, we've sent a carrier strike group off into the Mideast once again. The White House National Security Advisor John Bolton said on Sunday that the U.S. was deploying a bomber. Oh, that was for the B-52s. The Bomber Task Force is going to help out the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. They sent that over to the Central Command region, which includes the Middle East. And Bolton said that the movement of these military assets, and they're powerful ones, folks, but the movement was in response, quote, to a number of troubling and escalating indications and warnings. He didn't provide details, but that was last Sunday. Details have come out, and there's been intelligence that Iran was going to try and do something provocative. They loaded up some missiles on some boats over there in the Strait of Hormuz, and this has alarmed the Pentagon because they've got these short-range missiles on boats that could try and hit our ships there. Iran has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. You see, right now, President Trump has put the sanctions back on them. President Trump has now there was waivers for other countries that were still dealing with Iran. They were still buying oil. They were still trading with Iran during the sanctions, and President Trump had given them a period of time to come in line with the sanctions, and now that time has expired. So now what's happening with Iran is that the sanctions are having an effect, but they're backing up. It's like backing up a wild animal in a corner, my friends. And you don't know, when you back a wild animal up into the corner, you just don't know what it's going to do. So again, there's a lot of tension going there with that area, because Iran has been trying to extend its influence with China, with Russia. And that's the other thing. Let me get to that. Well, I can, because this stuff all dovetails together. There is this triangulation. I'll say it again. between Russia and China and Iran, and possibly even Turkey's in the mix somehow that we're not fully aware of as yet. Doesn't matter right now, but the bottom line is this: the real threats and the real collision courses that we are on right now are between China and Russia and Iran. And look at what's going on in the stock market just this past week because of the trade war, the tariff war that we've been having with China. And I've been saying this for a long time. I support a lot of Trump's policies politically. I've always questioned this thing with the trade war. Trade wars have generally, historically, never gone well. It was a trade war with Japan that brought us into World War II, as I've shared in the past. We're having this trade war with China now. China is backing down, and not backing down in a good way. They're not cooperating. They've made some commitments, and now recently they're backing away from those commitments, and they're taking a stronger stance, and it's affecting the stock market. The stock market has lost trillions of dollars in just the last couple of days. Tariffs are going up. The trade talks are collapsing. Just in today's Wall Street Journal, I just picked this out earlier today, the new hard line taken by China in trade talks, surprising the White House and threatening to derail negotiations, came after Beijing interpreted recent statements and actions by President Trump as a sign the U.S. was ready to make concessions, said people familiar with the thinking of the Chinese side. High-level negotiations are scheduled to resume today, Thursday, in Washington, but the expectation and the stakes have changed significantly. A week ago, the assumptions was that the negotiators would be closing the deal. Now they're trying to keep it from collapsing. And one of the Chinese negotiators simply said this: things that are unfavorable to us, Mr. Trump, no matter how you ask, we will not take any step back. Do not even think about it. The bottom line is this: China is playing hardball. President Trump's playing hardball, and China's playing hardball. But it's these type of things that when you have a trade war and you have an economic breakdown, it leads to other things. It leads to things that can spin out of control. In fact, General Jack Keane, somebody I respect, I see him on TV a lot. For those of you who may not be familiar with Jack Keane, he's a retired American 4-star general. He was the former vice chief of staff of the United States Army. And now he serves as defense analyst and chairman for the board for an institute for the study of war. General Jack Keane is highly respected. He's a retired general, but he's been saying something for really many months, if not almost a year now. General Keane has been saying this, quote, "I think in the long run we are on a collision course with China because China is interested in regional hegemony, specifically in the South China Sea there. And they keep challenging the American ships that are there and the carrier groups that are there." And General Keane went on to say they want the United States influence to be reduced in the region. And that's what's been going on there. We've got things going on in the Middle East. We've got things going on in the South China Sea. We've got things now because Rocket Man is back. Back in October, the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Decatur had to maneuver to avoid a collision with a Chinese warship when it came with the Chinese warship. I saw pictures of this. The Chinese warship came within 45 yards of the bow of the American ship, almost rammed them. And the U.S. Navy characterized it as, quote, unsafe and unprofessional. Yeah, that was just being diplomatic. That was just diplomatic language, unsafe and unprofessional. But all the stuff, it's just like the water it was at a soft simmer, and now it's just beginning to really, I believe, boil over a little bit. I'm going to just go through my stack of stuff here. An Australian newspaper a few months back quoted the Chinese admiral's recipe, so to speak. I don't think I saw this in a maybe it was in some of the American media, but I'm reading it from an Australian news report right now. And this was what the leading Chinese admiral, the head Chinese admiral said, quote, "We need to sink 2 aircraft carrier groups." You know, they're talking about American carrier groups, my friends. This Rear Admiral Lu Wan told an audience in Shenzhen during a speech that the ongoing disputes over the ownership of the East and South Chinese Seas could be resolved by sinking 2 U.S. supercarriers. That's going to resolve something? That's World War III. If the Chinese attack one of our carrier groups, just get down into your basements, load up on water, load up on food, because that's World War III. And this is what this admiral is publicly advocating. Taiwan Central News Agency reported that Admiral Lu gave a wide-ranging speech to the state of Sino-U.S. relations. The high-profile hawkish military commentator reportedly declared the current trade spat, see how the trade war is connected to the military war, to the economic war can lead into a military war? Because this guy says it's definitely not simply friction over economics and trade, but it's a prime strategic issue. So again, we see these factions, these superpowers trying to come together. And what they want to do, as I said a moment ago, is I believe they really want to, and I see this happening, folks. There's a strategy that's being developed to overwhelm the system, so that we're spreading our forces very thin. Let me proceed to show you what I mean by that, because we've also got a carrier group off the coast of Venezuela, because the Chinese, as I said in the last block, the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians have all brought in troops and have all brought in military aid and support into Venezuela, right here in our hemisphere. And last week, it looked like Nicolas Maduro, the dictator, the socialist dictator of Venezuela, it looked like he was going to be removed. There were reports that Maduro was going to get out of the country, because it looked like the military was joining in with Guaido, the new president that we're supporting, the opposition president that we're supporting. And it looked like Guaido was going to get full control of the government there in Venezuela, and that Maduro was leaving. And at the last moment, we find out Maduro's not leaving. Why? Because Putin told him don't leave. Putin told him to stay. And all of a sudden, the military went back under Maduro's control, and it all fell apart. And I want to tell you something, folks. This has been downplayed a lot here in this country. But make no mistake about it, this was a major loss from an American perspective. And it's a major victory from a Russian, Chinese, and Iranian perspective. Make no mistake about it, it will embolden them even further. And like I said, there's growing suspicion, it hasn't been verified, but there's growing suspicion that Russia has moved some nukes into Venezuela. And if he has, this is like the Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0, except this time around, I don't expect Russia to back down. Therefore, I don't think it's really being talked about a lot. I don't think they want it really well, of course they don't want it to escalate. There's no question about that. But again, more fuel for the fire. The other day, Vice President Mike Pence, speaking somewhere, has warned and has stated that the Iranian regime has been working with Venezuela's dictatorship to establish a safe haven for its terrorist proxies. Pence was addressing the Council of the Americas down in South America there. And Pence went on to say that Hezbollah is working to extend its dangerous network throughout Venezuela and from there throughout our hemisphere. Now, why would Hezbollah want to be here in this hemisphere? I thought it was all about just Israel and Israeli land. No, folks. No, folks. I keep telling you this. It's about Islamic jihad. It's about the world domination. That's the underlying current of so much things that are interjecting. You've got the facet of the kings of the East with Russia and with China, as I've shared in the past, and then you've got the thing going on with the caliphate. These are all last days geo-prophetical maneuverings of Almighty God working through the nations. We know top OAS, Organization of American States officials, said this. We know that China, Iran, and others are trying very hard to extend their presence in Venezuela. They are exploiting the vast natural resources of Venezuela, and they are in fact having a field day with thousands and millions of kilometers from their own countries. And we were not able to get Maduro out. Those external allies that helped Maduro overcome an attempted overthrow by Juan Guaido, the opposition lawmaker the United States and other Western governments recognized in January, is it's hurting right now. And again, I'll say it again, it's been downplayed. There's more. There's more geo-prophetical maneuverings. Let me go back to where I began at the top of the broadcast about those rockets that were being shot over Israel from Islamic Jihad. And I told you, folks, there's nothing coincidental about that. Iran is a central player here, and coordinating with China, coordinating with Russia. But listen to this from today's Gatestone article. And this article is oozing and dripping with prophetic significance. We need to pay attention to what's being said here, because I got this article posted on the Open Up the Doors Facebook page. But the Gatestone article today says this. After raining down some 600 rockets, it's really closer to 700, that killed 4 Israelis this past week, the Netanyahu government responded with overwhelming force, deploying jet fighters to carry out multiple airstrikes, killing 23 Gaza residents, including a pregnant woman, according to Palestinian officials. However, the pregnant woman and her child are now confirmed as having been killed by a Palestinian rocket that fell short. Again, the propaganda goes out that Israel is killing innocent women and children, when in fact it was the Palestinians, it was friendly fire, if you can call it that, from their perspective, that killed this pregnant woman. But the article goes on to say, and so the cycle of violence makes another cruel revolution. What makes the events of the past week different from earlier rockets and retaliation episodes? Let me rephrase that because it's a question. What makes the events of the past week different from earlier rockets and retaliation episodes? The reaction of Arab intellectuals and other thought leaders in the Muslim world. Now, the Arab intellectuals they're going to quote mention here are from Saudi Arabia, but that makes it very interesting. But they go on to say, consider the tweet of Dr. Turki al-Hamad, a well-known Saudi author and thinker. He tweeted, quote, "It's a repeating loop. Rockets are fired from Gaza into Israel. Israel bombs Gaza. Someone or other mediates. The fighting stops." And he's correct. It's been going on for years now. And the common Palestinian folks pay the price. This is resistance, my friend. Here's the thing that caught my attention. Iran and Turkey are in trouble, and the Palestinians are paying the price. Iran and Turkey want the same thing. I say it week after week after week. They both want a caliphate. They both want hegemony in the area. And they're just using the Palestinians as their pawns, as their play pieces for their own agendas and purposes. But what this guy points out is that coming from Saudi Arabia, this use of scare quotes, as he says, around resistance, is the willingness to blame Iran and Turkey. Why is that? Why do I say that's prophetic significance? Because when you look at the Gog-Magog caliphate of Ezekiel 38 and 39, Saudi Arabia is not part of that caliphate. Dedan, it says in Ezekiel 37 that Dedan stands aloof, and Sheba, Dedan and Sheba stand aloof, watching when Magog comes into the land. They're not part of it. They're against it. There's more, and I'm running out of time. I knew I would. But here's the thing. Here's the other piece to the puzzle. Here's the other piece of the triangulation. This past week, Sudan's government failed. And coming into the vacuum are several different countries, but understand this. Sudan, once being a part of ancient Ethiopia, will eventually fall into line with Turkey and Iran, which are the main Axis powers of the Magog Confederation, as I said in Ezekiel 38-39. Watch for Turkey to quickly cozy up to Sudan now that the Sudanese government has fallen. They've already begun to do it. I've already seen it in the papers. There are confirmed reports that Turkey is backing ISIS in Libya. Again, Libya, according to Ezekiel 38-39, is part of the Magog Confederacy. Erdogan and Turkey, they're making he's making all these plays. He's doing all these political machinations, which are nothing less than the what's the term, folks? I'm waiting for somebody on Facebook to tell me the term. The geo-prophetical maneuverings of God. Today, well, I'm sorry, not today, Tuesday. I'm looking at the clock here. I only got a few minutes. You know what? I'm going to have to get some closing thoughts here. I have too much fodder for the cannons here, but let me begin to wind it down because I am running out of time here. Of course, all of this can be filed under wars and rumors of wars, of course. But it certainly seems like this, my friends. All of the major powers and players are on a collision course. And when these worlds collide, rest assured that God's geo-prophetical maneuverings are all being played out according to his divine plan. And nothing, absolutely nothing, takes him by surprise or catches him off guard or catches him asleep. And I'm sharing this with you so it wouldn't take us by surprise or find us off guard. Because ultimately this is where it's all heading. It's all heading to ground zero. Ground zero, my friends, is Israel. Ground zero is Jerusalem. For the day is coming when Joel's prophecy will come to fulfillment. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, we're already there. They're already back in the land. But then Joel says, I will also gather together the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's geo-prophetical maneuvering. And I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, as they have also divided up my land. Let the nations be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. It is, my friends, and will be a geo-prophetical maneuvering taking place, because that is the end game. And in that day it shall be that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. I'm out of time. I got to pick this up again very soon. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. Keep it right here on Faith FM for some more 24/7 great Christian programming from the East End of Long Island.